Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 3. Okay. Faith. Visualization of and belief in attainment of desire. The second step toward riches. Faith is the head chemist of the mind. When faith is blended with thought, subconscious mind instantly picks up the vibration, translates it into its spiritual equivalent, and transmit it to infinite intelligence, as in the case of prayer. The emotions of faith, love, and sex are the most powerful of all the major positive emotions. When the three are blended, they have the effect of coloring the thought in such a way that it instantly reaches the subconscious mind. Where it is changed into its spiritual equivalent, the only form that induces a response from infinite intelligence. How to develop faith. There comes now a statement which will give a better understanding of the importance the principle of autosuggestion assumes in the transmutation of desire into its physical or monetary equivalent. Namely, faith is a state of mind which may be induced or created by affirmation or repeated instructions to the subconscious mind through the principle of autosuggestion. As an illustration, consider the purpose for which you are presumably reading this book. The object is, naturally, to acquire the ability to transmute the intangible thought impulse of desire into its physical counterpart, money. By following the instructions laid down in the chapters of autosuggestion in the subconscious mind, as summarized in the chapter on autosuggestion, you may convince the subconscious mind that you believe you will receive that for which you ask, and it will act upon that belief, which your subconscious mind passes back to you in the form of faith, followed by definite plans for procuring that which you desire. Faith is a state of mind which you may develop at will, after you have mastered the 13 principles, because it is a state of mind which develops voluntarily through application and use of these principles. Repetition of affirmation of orders to your subconscious mind is the only known method of voluntary development of the emotion of faith. Perhaps the meaning may be made clearer through the following explanation as to the way men sometimes become criminals. Stated in the words of a famous criminologist, when men first come into contact with crime, they abhor it. If they remain in contact with the crime for a time, they become accustomed to it and endure it. If they remain in contact with it long enough, they finally embrace it and become influenced by it. This is the equivalent of saying that any impulse of thought which is repeatedly passed on to the subconscious mind is, finally, accepted and acted upon by the subconscious mind, which proceeds to translate the impulse into a physical equivalent by the most practical procedure available. In connection with this, consider again this statement. All the thoughts which have been emotionalized, given feeling, and mixed with faith begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent or counterpart. The emotions or the feeling portions of thoughts are the factors which give thoughts vitality, life, and action. The emotions of faith, love, and sex, when mixed with any thought impulse, give it greater action than any of these emotions can do singly. Not only thought impulses which have mixed with faith, but those which have been mixed with any of the positive emotions, or any of the negative emotions, may reach and influence the subconscious mind. No one is doomed in bad luck. From this statement, you will understand that the subconscious mind will translate into physical equivalent a thought impulse of a negative or destructive nature, just as readily as it is will act upon thought impulses of a positive or constructive nature. This accounts for the strange phenomenon which so many millions of people experience, referred to as misfortune or bad luck. There are millions of people who believe themselves doomed or poverty and doomed to failure because of some strange force which they believe they have no control over. They are the creators of their own misfortunes because of this negative belief, which is picked up by the subconscious mind and translated into its physical equivalent. This is an appropriate place at which to suggest again that you may benefit by passing on to your subconscious mind any desire which you wish translated into physical or monetary equivalent. in a state of expectancy or belief that the transmutation will actually take place. Your belief or faith is the element which determines the action of your subconscious mind. There is nothing to hinder you from deceiving your subconscious mind when giving it instructions through auto-suggestion, as I deceive my son's subconscious mind. Well, reading out loud takes practice and fluid. To take the deceit more realistic, conduct yourself just as you would if you were already in possession of a material thing that you are demanding. When you call upon your subconscious mind, the subconscious mind will transmutate into its physical equivalent by the most direct and practical media available. Any order which is given to it in a state of belief or faith that the order will be carried out. Surely enough has been stated to give a starting point from which one may, through experiment or practice, acquire the ability to mix faith with any order given to the subconscious mind. Perfection will come through practice. It cannot become by merely reading instructions. It is essential for you to encourage the positive emotions as dominating forces of your mind and discourage and eliminate negative emotions. A mind dominated by positive emotions becomes a favorable abode for the state of mind known as faith. A mind so dominated may at will give the subconscious mind instructions which it will accept and act upon immediately. Faith is a state of mind which may be induced by autosuggestion. All down the ages, the religionists have admonished struggling humanity to have faith in this, that the other dogma of creed, but they have failed to tell people how to have faith. They have not stated that faith is a state of mind that may be induced by self-suggestion. In language which any normal human being can understand, we will describe all that is known about the principle through which faith will be developed where it does not already exist. Have faith in yourself, faith in the infinite. Before we begin, you should be reminded again that faith is the eternal elixir which gives life, power, and emotion and action to the impulse of thought. The foregoing sentence is worth reading a second time, and a third and a fourth is worth reading aloud. Faith is the starting point of all accumulation of riches. Faith is the basis of all miracles and all mysteries which cannot be analyzed by the rules of science. Faith is the only known antidote for failure. Faith is the element, the chemical which, when mixed with prayer, gives one direct communication with infinite intelligence. Faith is the element which transforms the ordinary vibration of thought, created by the finite mind of man, into the spiritual equivalent. Faith is the only agency through which the cosmic force of infinite intelligence can be harnessed and used by man. Interesting, yes? The magic of self-suggestion. The proof is simple and easily demonstrated. It is wrapped up in the principle of autosuggestion. Let us consider our attention, therefore, upon the subject of self-suggestion, and find out what it is and what it is capable of achieving. It is a well-known fact that one comes finally to believe that whatever one repeats to oneself, whether the statement is true or false, if a man repeats a lie over and over, he will eventually accept the lie as truth. Moreover, he will believe it to be truth. Every man is what he is because of the dominating thoughts which he permits to occupy his mind, thoughts which a man deliberately places in his own mind, and encourages with sympathy, and with which he mixes any or more one of the emotions, constitute the motivating forces which direct and control his every movement, act, and deed. Come now a very significant statement of truth. Thoughts which are mixed with any of the feelings of emotions constitute a magic force which attracts other similar or related thoughts. A thought thus magnetized with emotion may be compared to a seed which, planted in fertile soil, germinates, grows, and multiplies over and over again, until that which was originally small seed becomes countless millions of seeds. The human mind is constantly attracting vibrations which harmonize with that which dominates the mind. Any thought, idea, plan, or purpose which one holds in one's mind attracts a host of its relatives. Add these relatives to its own force and grow until it becomes the dominating, motivating master of the individual, and whose mind has been housed by negative thoughts. Now, let us go back to the starting point and become informed as to how the original seed of an idea, plan, or purpose may be planted in the mind. The information is easily conveyed. Any idea, plan, or purpose may be placed in the mind through repetition of thought. This is why you are asked to write out a statement of your major purpose or definite chief aim. Commit it to memory and repeat it over and over in audible words day after day until these vibrations of sound have reached your subconscious mind. Resolve to throw off the influences of any unfortunate environments and to build your own life into order. Taking inventory of mental assets and liabilities, you may discover that your greatest weakness is lack of self-confidence. This handicap can be surmounted and timidity, translated into courage through the aid of the principle of autosuggestion. The application of this principle may be made through a simple arrangement of positive thought impulse stated in writing, memorized, and repeated, until they become a part of your working equipment of the subconscious faculty of your mind. Subconscious is powerful, man. Self-confidence, barely see too. Self-confidence formula. First, I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my first definite purpose in life. I demand myself to be persistent, continuous action toward its attainment, and I here and now promise to render such action. Second, I realize the dominating thoughts of my mind will eventually reproduce themselves in outward physical action, and gradually transform themselves into physical realities. Therefore, I will concentrate my thoughts for 30 minutes daily upon the task of thinking of the person I intend to become, thereby creating in my mind a clear mental picture. I know through the principle of autosuggestion, any desire that I persistently hold in my mind will eventually seek expression through some physical means of attaining it. I will devote 10 minutes daily to demanding of myself the development of self-confidence. Fourth, I have clearly written down a description of my definite chief aim in life, and I will never stop trying until I shall have and develop sufficient self-confidence for its attainment. Fifth, I fully realize that no wealth or position can long endure unless built upon truth and justice. Therefore, I will engage in no transaction that does not benefit all those who are involved. I will succeed by attracting to myself the forces I wish to use and the cooperation of other people. I will induce others to serve me because of my own willingness to serve others. I will eliminate hatred, envy, jealousy, selfishness, and cynicism by developing love for all humanity, because I know that a negative attitude toward others can never bring me success. I will cause others to believe in me because I will believe in them, and in myself I will sign my name onto this formula, commit it to memory, and repeat it aloud once a day, with full faith that it will gradually influence my thoughts and actions so that I will become a self-reliant, successful person. Back of this formula is a law of nature which no man has yet been able to explain. The name by which one calls this law is of little importance. The important is that it works, for the glory of and success of mankind. If it is used constructively, on the other hand, if used destructively, it will destroy such a readily mind. In this statement may be found a very significant truth. For those who go down in defeat and end their lives in poverty, misery, and distress, do so because of negative application of principles of autosuggestion. This cause may be found in the fact that all impulses of thought have a tendency to clothe themselves in their physical environment. Disaster of negative thinking. The subconscious mind makes no distinction between constructive and destructive thoughts. It works with the material we feed it. Through our thought impulses, the subconscious mind will translate into reality a thought driven by fear, just as readily as it will translate into reality a thought driven by courage and faith. Fuck fear. False evidence appearing real. I just threw that in there. Just as electricity will turn the wheels of industry and render useful service if used constructively, or snuff out life if wrongly used, so will the law of autosuggestion lead you to peace and prosperity, or down into the valley of misery, failure, and death. According to your degree of understanding and application of this, it will work. If you fill your mind with fear, doubt, and unbelief in your ability to connect with the world and with forces of infinite intelligence, the law of autosuggestion will take this spirit of unbelief and use it as a pattern by which your subconscious mind will translate into the physical equivalent, negative. Like the wind that carries out the ship out east and another west, the law of autosuggestion will lift you up or pull you down, accordingly to the way you set your sails of thought. The law of autosuggestion, which any person may rise to altitudes of achievements which stagger the mind and the imagination, is well described in this verse. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win, but you think you can't, it's almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out in the world we find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you are outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles will always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. Observe the words which have been emphasized, and you will catch the deep meaning which the poet had in mind. What genius lies asleep in your brain? Hard to see, man. Somewhere in your makeup there lies sleeping the seed of achievement, which, if aroused and put into action, will carry you to heights such as you may never have hoped to attain before. Just as a master musician may cause the most beautiful strains of music to pour forth from the strings of a violin, so may you arouse the genius which lies asleep in your brain, and cause it to drive you upward to whatever goal you may wish to achieve. Abraham Lincoln was a failure at everything he tried, until he was well past the age of 40. He was a Mr. Nobody from nowhere, until a great experience came into his life, aroused the sleeping genius within his heart and brain, and gave the world one of its really great men. That experience was mixed with emotions and sorrow and love. It came to him through Anne Rutledge, the only woman whom he ever truly loved. It is a known fact that the emotion of love is closely akin to the state of mind known as faith, and this for the reason that love comes very near to translating one's thought impulses into their spiritual development. During his work of research, the author discovered from the analysis of the life work and achievements of hundreds of men of outstanding accomplishments that there was the influence of a woman's love backed by nearly every one of them. Wow. Influence of a woman's love. If you wish evidence of the power of faith, study the achievement of men and come who have employed it. At the head of the list comes Nazarene. The basis of Christianity is faith. No matter how many people have perverted or misinterpreted the meaning of this great force, the sum and substance of the teachings and the achievements of Christ, which may have been interpreted as miracles, were nothing more or less than faith. If there are any such phenomena as miracles, they are produced only through the state of mind known as faith. I'll get through this, I haven't read out loud in a while. I'll get better with practice. Let us consider the power of faith as demonstrated by a man who is well known to all civilization, Mahatma Gandhi of India. In this man, the world had one of the most astounding examples known to civilization of the possibilities of faith. Gandhi wielded more potential power than any man living in his time. In this, despite the fact that he had none of the orthodox tools of power such as money, battleships, soldiers, and materials of warfare. Gandhi had no money, no home, and he did not own a suit or clothes, but he did have power. How did he come to that power? He created out of the understanding of the principle of faith, and through his ability to transplant into that faith into the minds of 200 million people. Gandhi accomplished the astounding feat of influencing 200 million minds to coalesce and move into union as a single mind. What other force on earth except faith could do such things? Parch. Okay, because of the need for faith and cooperation in operating business and industry, it will be both interesting and profitable to analyze an event which provides an excellent understanding of the method by which industrialists and businessmen accumulate great fortunes by giving before they get. The event chosen for this illustration dates back to 1900, when the United States Steel Corporation was formed. As you read in the story, keep in mind these fundamental facts that you will understand how ideas have been converted into huge fortunes. If you are one of those who have been often wondered how great fortunes are accumulated, this story of the creation of the United States Steel Corporation was enlightening. If you have any doubt that men can think and grow rich, this story should dispel that doubt, because you can plainly see in the United States Steel application of a major portion of the principles described in this book. This astounding description of the power of an idea was dramatically told by John Lowell in the New York World Telegram, with whose courtesy it is here reprinted. A pretty after-dinner speech for $1 billion. When, on the evening of December 12, 1900, some 80 of the nation's financial nobility gathered in the banquet hall of the University Club of Fifth Avenue to honor a young man from the out west, not half a dozen of the guests realized they were to witness the most significant episode in American history. Edward Simmons and Charles Smith, their hearts full of gratitude for the lavish hospitality bestowed on them by Charles Schwab during a recent visit to Pittsburgh, had arranged a dinner to introduce the 38-year-old steel man to Eastern banking societies. But they didn't expect him to stampede the convention. They warned him, in the fact, that the bosoms within New York's stuffed shirts would not be responsive to his oratory, and that, if he didn't want to bore the Stillmans and the Harrimans and the Vanderbilts, he had better limit himself to 15 or 20 minutes of polite vaporings and let it go to that. Even John Pierpont Morgan, sitting on the right hand of Schwab, as became his imperial dignity, intended to grace the banquet table with the presence only briefly, and so far as the press and public were concerned, the whole affair was of no little movement, with no mention of it found in the local papers. So the two hosts and their distinguished guests ate their dinner, and there was little conversation, and that was a few of the bankers and brokers had met Schwab, whose career had flowered along the banks of Monongahela, and none who knew him well. But before the evening was over, it's hard to read now, I can't see. And with them, Money Master Morgan were to be swept off their feet, and $1 billion baby, United States Steel Corporation, was formed. It's perhaps unfortunate, for the sake of history, that no record of Charles Schwab's speech at the dinner ever was made. It is probable, however, that it was a homely speech, somewhat that ungrammatical, full of epigram and threaded with wit. But aside from that, it was a galvanic force and effect upon the $5 billion of estimated capital that was represented by the diners. After it was over and the gathering was still under its spell, although Schwab had talked for 90 minutes, Morgan led the orator to a recessed window where, dangling their legs from the high, uncomfortable seat, they talked for an hour. The magic of the Schwab personality had been turned on, full force, but what was more important and lasting was the full-fledged, clear-cut program he laid down for the arrangement of steel. Many other men had tried to interest Morgan in slapping together a steel trust after the pattern of the biscuit. Wire, hoop, sugar, rubber, whiskey, oil, or chewing gum combinations. John Gates, the gambler, he urged it. Morgan distrusted him. The Moore boys, Bill and Jim, Chicago stock jobbers, who had glued together a match trust and a cracker corporation, had urged it and failed. Albert H. Gary, the sanctimonious country lawyer, wanted to foster it. But he wasn't big enough to be impressive. Until Schwab's eloquence took J.P. Morgan to the heights from which he could visualize the solid results of the most daring financial undertaking ever conceived, the project was regarded as a delirious dream or easy money crackpots. The financial magnetism that began, a generation ago, to attract thousands of small and sometimes inefficiently managed companies into large and competition-crushing combinations, had become operative in the steel world through the devices that jovial business pirate John Gates. Gates had already formed the American Steel and Wire Company out of a chain of small concerns, and together with Morgan had created the Federal Steel Company. But by the side of Andrew Carnegie's gigantic vertical trust, a trust owned and opened by 53 partners, those other combinations were became. They might combine to their heart's content, but a whole lot of them couldn't make a dent in the Carnegie organization, and Morgan knew it. The eccentric old Scot knew it too. From the magnificent heights of Skibo Castle he had viewed, first with amusement and then with resentment, the attempts of Morgan's smaller companies to cut into his business. When the attempts became too bold, Carnegie's temper was translated into anger and retaliation. He decided to duplicate every mill owned by his rivals. Hitherto he hadn't been interested in wire, pipe, hoops, or sheet. Instead, He was content to sell such companies the raw steel and let them work it into whatever the shape they wanted. Now, with Schwab as his chief and able lieutenant, he planned to drive the enemies to the wall. My God. I can see why the meeting takes place. Yeah, so my goal is to read 500 books in 10 years. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, where are we? Okay, so it was that speech Charles Schwab Morgan saw the answer to his problem of comedy. A trust without Carnegie, giant of them all, would be no trust at all. Plum pudding, no one writer said without the plums. Schwab's speech on the night of December 12, 1900, undoubtedly carried the inference, though not the pledge, that the vast Carnegie enterprise could be brought under the Morgan tent. He talked of the world's future for steel, of reorganization for efficiency, of specialization, of the scrapping of the unsuccessful mills and concentration of effort on the flourishing of properties, of economies in the ore traffic, of economies in overhead and administrative departments, of capturing foreign markets. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of their customary piracy, their purposes. He inferred he had been to create monopolies, raise prices, and pay themselves fat dividends out of privilege. Schwab condemned the system in his heartiest manner. The short-sightedness of such a policy, he told his hearers, lay in the fact that it restricted the market in error when everything cried, wow, man, these are dirty or something. Next time I'll be more prepared. My nose is fucking itchy. Damn. We'll get through this chapter, man. Okay, the short-sightedness of such a policy, he told his hearers, lay in the fact that it restricted the market in an era when everything cried for expansion. Industrial era, steel. Now we're in the information era. By cheapening the cost of steel, he argued, an ever-expanding market would be created. More uses for steel would be devised, and a goodly portion of the world trade could be captured. Actually, though he did not know it, Schwab was an apostle of modern mass production. So the dinner at the University Club came to an end. Morgan went home to think about Schwab's rosy predictions. Schwab went back to Pittsburgh to run the steel business for Wee and Carnegie, while Gary and the rest went back to their stock tickers to fiddle around in anticipation of the next move. It was not long coming. It took Morgan about 1 week to digest the feat of reason Schwab had placed before them. When he had assured himself that no financial indigestion was to result, he sent for Schwab, and found that young man rather coy. Mr. Carnegie, Schwab indicated, might not like it if he found his trusted company president had been flirting with the Emperor of Wall Street, the street upon which Carnegie was resolved never to tread. Then it was suggested by John Gates, the go-between, that if Schwab happened to be in the Belleville Hotel in Philadelphia, J.P. Morgan might also happen to be there. When Schwab arrived, however, Morgan was inconveniently ill at his New York home, and so on the elder man's pressing invitation, Schwab went to New York and presented himself at the door of the financier's library. Now certain economic historians have professed the belief that from the beginning to the end of the drama, the stage was set for Carnegie. At the dinner to Schwab, the famous speech, the Sunday night conference between Schwab and the Money King, were events arranged by the canny Scott. The truth is exactly not the opposite. When Schwab was called in to consummate the deal, he didn't even know whether the little boss, as Andrew was called, would so much as to listen as an offer to sell, particularly to a group of men whom Carnegie regarded as being endowed with something less than holiness. But Schwab did not take into the conference with him, in his own handwriting, 6 sheets of copper-plated figures. It's hard to read, man. I need light next time. His mind, his physical worth, and his earning capacity of every steel company. 4 men pondered over these figures all night, the chief, etc. There was a golf game in January of the first on the first cracking of the frost. Heath and St. Links and Winchester. Oh my God. Four men pondered over these figures all night. The chief, of course, was Morgan. Almost done, and I'm running out of gas. Okay, here we go. Four men pondered over these figures all night. The chief, of course, was Morgan, steadfast in his belief in the divine right of money. With him was his aristocratic partner, Robert Bacon, a scholar and a gentleman. The third was John Gates, whom Morgan scorned as a gambler and and was a tool. The fourth was Schwab, who knew more about the process of making and selling steel than any other group of men. Throughout the conference, the Pittsburghers' figures were never questioned. If he said a company was worth so much, then it was worth that much and more. He was insistent, too, upon including in the combination only those concerns he nominated. He had conceived a corporation in which there would be no duplication, not even so to satisfy the greed friends who wanted to unload their companies upon the broad Morgan shoulders. When dawn came, Morgan rose and straightened his back. Only one question remained. Do you think you can persuade Andrew Carnegie to sell? I can try, Schwab said. If you can get him to sell, I will undertake the matter, said Morgan. So far, so good. But would Carnegie sell? How much would he demand? Schwab got about $320 million. What would he take payment in, common or preferred stocks? Bonds, cash. Nobody could raise $1/3 in cash. There was a golf game in January on the first frost in St. Andrews Links in Westchester, and Andrew bound in his sweaters against the cold. Charlie talking volubly as usual to keep his spirits up, but no word of business was mentioned until the pair sat down in the cozy warmth of the Carnegie cottage nearby. Then, with the same persuasiveness as that hypnotized 80 millionaires at the University Club, Schwab poured into the glittering promises of retirement and comfort, of untold millions to satisfy the old man's social caprices. Carnegie capitulated, wrote a figure on a slip of paper, handed it to Schwab, and said, "All right, that's what we'll sell for." The figure was about $400 million. That was reached by taking the $320 million mentioned by Schwab and adding another $80 million to represent the increased capital value over the previous 2 years. Later, on the deck of a transatlantic liner, the Scotsman said ruefully to Morgan, "I wish I had asked you for $100 million more." "If you had asked for it, you'd have gotten it," Morgan said. There was an uproar, of course. A British correspondent cabled out the foreign steel world was appalled by the gigantic combination. President Hadley of Yale declared that unless trusts were regulated, the country might expect an emperor in Washington within the next 25 years. But that able stock manipulator Keene went at his work of shoving the new stock at the public so vigorously that all the excess water, estimated by some at nearly 600 million, was absorbed in a twinkling. So Carnegie had his millions, and the Morgan Syndicate had 62 million, all of it for its trouble. The boys from Gates and Gary had their millions. The 38-year-old Schwab had his reward. He was made president of the new corporation and remained in control till 1930. Last paragraph, man. Next time if anyone does watch this, I'll be better. This is just first time reading out loud, man. A couple times. Riches begin with thought. The dramatic story of the big business which you have just finished is a perfect illustration of the method by which desire can be transmuted into physical equivalent. That giant organization was created in the mind of one man. The plan by which the organization was provided with the steel mills that gave it financial stability was created in the mind of the same man. His faith, his desire, his imagination, his persistence were the real ingredients that went into the United States Steel Company, the steel mills and mechanical equipment acquired by the corporation, after it had been brought into legal existence, were incidental. By careful analysis will disclose the fact that the appraised value of the properties acquired by that corporation increased in value by an estimated $600 million by the mere transaction which consolidated them under the one management. In other words, Charles Schwab's idea, plus the faith with which he conveyed it to the minds of Morgan and others, was marketed for a profit of $600 million. Not an insignificant sum for such a simple idea. The United States Steel Corporation prospered and became one of the richest and most powerful corporations in America, employed thousands of people, developing new uses for steel and opening new markets. Riches began in the form of thought. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind the thought is put into motion. Faith removes limitations. Remember this when you are ready to bargain with life for whatever it is you ask for. Your price for whatever it is that you ask, your price for having passed this way. Okay, that's chapter 3. Man, I guess the brain muscle needs work. Okay, that took 35 minutes. So next time we'll be